Good morning. Welcome to this podcast episode. I'm going to play the question, have a listen, take some notes, and then get into answering this.
Hi, Jen. Um, Leaving you this message because I have been experiencing a creeping kidney issue. Um, so to give you a bit of back history, been following your work for quite some time. Have been through quite a lot in the last few years. Including the death of my son's father, and just some very sort of heavy relationship stuff. I've been working really hard using your release techniques to try and move through this stuff, and just to start moving forward in life, but dealing with quite a bit of stuckness and depression um, for the last couple of years following everything that's happened. Anyway, for the last couple of months, I've started waking up in the mornings with really bad kidney pain. That's something that is familiar to me. I had kidney issues when I was in my early 20s, kidney infections and whatnot, but I haven't had any issues with them over the years. But yeah, just waking up with that really heavy, kind of dragging kidney pain. Um, I'm not drinking, I'm living a really healthy lifestyle. And I can't really put my finger on what's causing it. So I'm keen to hear your thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, great question. And I'm just sifting in my mind and reorganizing my thoughts as to how I will answer this. So, first of all, let's talk about the kidneys. Every organ for me obviously has a location. And it also has an emotion that it governs. And the kidneys are the organ of fear. So, whenever you ask me a question or whenever you're listening to anything that I might be sharing, even if it might be for someone else, is just see what resonates for you. And usually something's going to resonate for you. Your body's going to hear it, even if your mind doesn't comprehend it, when you start to feel a sensation or a reaction. Okay, it's often the body going, oh, okay, this is it. And then hopefully you can get more curious. So the kidney is the organ of fear. And a lot of us will have fear. I still walk with fear on a regular basis. Fear is something that doesn't go away. And that's something that I want to, I guess, coach or share about, is that quite often people want fear to go away. And I think we actually could help ourselves by learning to live with it and then learning to navigate it. Now, irrational fears are one of the behavioral manifestations, one of the undesirable behavioral manifestations of a full emotional cup. Because fear is there to keep us safe. And then there are irrational fears where they just don't make sense. They stop us from living life. So talking about fear is a little bit like talking about stress. So I remember people saying, you must be stressed, when I was manifesting things in my skin and my little crisis point that happened over a decade ago. I was like, I'm not stressed. Everything in my life felt really good. But now that I am living and my body is an expression, a much healthier expression of itself, I realized I was stressed, but I just wasn't feeling it in my head. So our body is always sending us messages, and it will find different ways to send us messages um, over time. And it's up to us to be able to become aware, to acknowledge, to be able to listen, and then to be able to interpret, which is really what I love to help people do, is to decipher the messages that your body might be giving you, but not just your physical body, things that are happening externally in your life as well, because I believe everything happens for a reason. So kidneys are the organ of fear. And I'd ask you to just notice what fears are coming up. What fears might be coming up around making a move or stepping out or trying something different in life or creating a change for yourself. Because I hear that you are motivated to make a change, which is why you've been diving into my work in the Moth Portal, which is incredible. And you've reached a stuck point, which what I would say is checking in about, is this out of resistance that I feel stuck? Or is it because this path I'm taking is out of alignment? So I think that you can never go wrong when you start to focus on yourself and you go into the world of personal and spiritual development. So I would say it's possibly a little bit of resistance. And I think people have this misconception that when they move forwards, as they get tapped into more of who they are, the life that they desire, perhaps their sole purpose, they think that life is going to flow. And I say, yeah, you can have flow for sure. That is available. The abundance, the prosperity is all available to us. Sometimes we're just blocking it. But that also doesn't mean that a life in flow is without challenges. You will still have challenges, but what changes is your ability to embrace them and to navigate them with a little bit more grace and ease, and to also see these challenges as a little test of what you can hold. Okay, so kidneys, and you've been experiencing this dragging, heavy feeling over the last couple of months, but you do have a history of it when you were back in your early 20s. So for whatever reason, and I'm not too sure how old you are now, but for whatever reason, it sounds like it's something that lay dormant for a little while, and now it's reared its head again. So is it because you're not listening to your body? Is it because you haven't been able to decipher the message from it? But having a history of kidney infections when you're in your 20s, I'm going to assume you may have had urinary tract infections. Okay, now it's possible that you just had kidney infections and it wasn't because of that, but usually it's a urinary tract infection that starts to track up and it gets to the kidneys. And that can be quite uncomfortable. So I'm also wondering, in my mind, we generally have two kidneys. I have definitely worked with people who were born with one kidney. Is which side? Was it your left side or your right side? Because that can be an indicator. But if we go back to where the root of kidney infections usually come from, well, the root being emotional, but where does it usually originate? Usually from a urinary tract infection. So urinary tract infection, this is probably one of those conditions that has a very common metaphysical meaning, but it's like, who are you pissed off at? And I would say, what relationships were you in your 20s? And were they relationships that really felt like they served and honored you? And so then this becomes another topic for you to release on. And I really want to talk about the release process that you've been exposed to via the Moth Portal and the release process that you get exposed to via the release course. And it's a little bit different. So going back to your early 20s when you first got this sign, and before kidney infections, it was probably urinary tract infections. Before urinary tract infections, we can create our awareness as to when our body was going to hit that pain point, hit that crisis point. So usually by the time we've got the pain, we had many, many signs beforehand, and I'd love to get you more aware. So I'll use another example is like the migraine. People will say, oh, you get an aura, but well before the aura, you've probably got other signs like not sleeping well, or, some people might notice they crave chocolate or they start drinking heaps of coffee, that they've got stress. Those are the signs before a migraine hits. So same as the kidney infections. Now, the interesting thing is that UTIs and kidney stuff, some people can get very similar pain as if it's an infection, but when they go get testing done, it's actually not an infection and it's the body simply giving it a sign. And that's where I love to dive into this emotional work. And now you've said you live a healthy lifestyle, you don't drink. Now, I know that I thought I used to live a healthy lifestyle in terms of diet and nutrition. And then I went through a very controlling phase with my diet and my food, trying all sorts of different diets, couldn't eat certain things, eliminating things every 2 weeks. And I thought that was healthy. And now I eat anything and everything. And I have a very different intention around what I eat and how I feel about it. So healthy is a very subjective meaning. Just going to throw that one out there. But yeah, this is usually why people come into what is this root cause, the metaphysical, the emotional anatomy meaning of what my body's trying to tell me, because actually my life's pretty good on paper, but I'm still getting these symptoms. And the body never lies. The body always speaks to us. We've just got to learn to speak its language and decipher the messages. Okay, so yeah, going into left and right side. So I know that this person who asked this question is part of the Moth Portal. And so I'm often going to talk about the Moth Portal. I'm going to talk about the release course because this is the entry point into this work. This is where you go into the depths and the layers. I want you to listen to the energetic body splits, in particular if you are getting one-sided kidney discomfort. And that's going to give you a insight into masculine and feminine energy, males and females, but also your own masculine, your own feminine energy as well. All right, so think back into your 20s, what was going on in your life at that time? And is it that you've got this safe space for it to come to the surface for you to be able to deal with it? Or is there some sort of repeating pattern that is happening right now? Someone that you're pissed off with, that you are in this pattern and you're not working through it because you maybe don't know how, or maybe it's incredibly uncomfortable, the solution of how to move through this. Okay, so you've been following my work for a while, which is really great. And I always trust that people will lead themselves into the next layer, the next layer. You have experienced in the last few years the death of your son's father and some heavy relationship stuff. So I don't know if the heavy relationship stuff was in relation to your son's father or relationship stuff after that. But for me already, when I ask you about what was going on in your 20s, who are you pissed off with, this has to do with relationships. A lot of the time, I am working with people around relationship stuff. There is just so much around that, so much to be healed, so much trauma, emotions that people store around people in their lives. And I always say that we cross paths with people for a reason. You've crossed paths with my work for a reason and a season as well. So what is it that we've got to resolve with the people that we cross paths with? What are the lessons in these new relationships? Because the same shit, different story is going to keep on coming up if we don't learn the lesson, if we don't process from previous events. So experiencing death is usually a pretty significant event in someone's life. I would say, I'm going to assume that it was a pretty significant thing to lose your son's father. Again, I'm not too sure if you're in a relationship with them, but regardless, the relationship that you did have with them is there's going to be stuff for you to process, including the death. Now, I'm just going to throw out some things. I guess this is more of the unspoken stuff, is that people can have feelings of hatred and resentment to the fact that they were left as a single parent and left with that responsibility. These become things to process. And it's usually stuff that people don't speak about because they feel guilty that they feel this way when someone is no longer living in this physical world. But the reality is, and how I work with people, is that anything that you're thinking of, anything that you are storing in your body, that starts to manifest in your external life, in your physical body, in your mental state, in your spiritual life. And so when we have these thoughts and we feel guilty and we think we shouldn't be thinking this way, we are starting to manifest these thoughts in a variety of ways. So the release process for me, which is what I facilitate with people or I teach people in the release course, and you get a glimpse of it on the Moth Portal membership, is to allow that space for the negativity. I don't want you dwelling in the negative. And often we will dwell in the negative when we don't process our emotions. We'll share stories with people and we create this story that actually doesn't have truth behind it. And the more we talk about the negative experiences, the more we give power and vibration to it. So we then dwell on it. It becomes subconscious thoughts. It becomes a fear in the background. And whatever we're thinking, we will start to manifest. Okay. And then when we give power to it with voice, we give a vibration and frequency to it, then we start to attract things at that level of vibration and frequency. So I say to people, with the release process, when you learn to do it, you get to be in the negative for a very short period of time where you're allowing everything to come out, no longer be stored in your body, to be subconscious or to be a fear. So it is a space where you are allowed to be the victim, angry, frustrated, sad, depressed for a moment in time. And when you learn the release process properly, these releases really should only take you a matter of minutes, a matter of a few minutes. So you've done it self-guided with the release flow teachings, which is on the Moth portal. And I did want to be able to give people insight into that process. But I know that when I get people on the release course and they start sharing their releases, so they usually transcribe them and we drop them into a private Facebook group, I'm often correcting a lot of things, because when we have got our own emotions, our human gets in the way, we will bypass the hard things. So that's the first thing for me, is if your release processes and you've been giving it a really good work and you say you've been working hard at it, and I really admire that, and you feel like it's not lifting, then that's where I would say go the next step into release. Like, can you trust me? The support is there if you were going to ask me questions, if you're going to get involved. And the Moth portal is just such a great ease into the release course. And if they're taking you longer than a few minutes, then something's off with the process, because it really should only take you a few minutes. I don't want the process to feel like a burden, because sometimes people have got pages and pages and thousands of releases and they think they're never going to end. But I promise you, you chip away at it, that list will get smaller and you'll be working on some present things, but then you start to create that space. So empty out your emotional cup, create space for more, and then you start to be able to create the space to manifest and put intention on the life that you actually desire to have. So yeah, for me, death is a beautiful thing. Death is a reminder of how to live life. And I do meet a lot of people who have a fear of dying. And I often say to them, it's because I believe that you're not living life to your fullest. And I have a little exercise on the Moth portal, which my one-to-one clients do as well. It's called Vision. And one of the exercises is leaving your legacy. And I refer to Bonnie Ware's book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. I can't actually think of what the top 5 or 10 regrets are, whatever number it is, but yeah, not living your life, not speaking your truth. Those are along the lines. So fear of death is usually the fear of you're not actually living your life. So I often contemplate death when I hear of death through clients, or even just getting this reminder, or, you know, I might have a quick brush where I'm like, oh, that could have been worse. I think, would I be happy if I died today? Would I be happy if I died in 6 months? And if the answer is no, what moves am I going to make to live the life so I don't so I don't die with regrets? Okay. So yeah, death and all of the things that came with experiencing his death are going to be big things to process. And sometimes when our body has gone through experiences, and trauma is very subjective, I like to call it stored emotions, is that we will block. We will block until the body and your nervous system feels safe, that it knows how to process things. So that's why we've got to give ourselves some time and often some support to help move through stuck periods of our life. Okay, so you've had heavy relationship stuff. Now, I don't know if this was related to that past relationship or new relationships that you've been in, or relationships prior to your son's father's death. As I said, relationships are a big thing that I'm often working through with my clients. And I think the best podcast for others to refer to would be the sacral and the heart chakra. And you've probably heard me refer to this a few times. I feel like I've said it a few times. That will give you insight to the sacral chakra and all of the relationship stuff and a lot of the unspoken stuff that people process with me And then that starts to create space for more and to be able to tap into the energetics of the sacral chakra, which is the sex, the money, the power. Sexual energy in this context, I talk about the magnetism attraction energy, but it does have to do with sexual energy as well. But that's usually quite beyond a lot of people until I start working with them. Okay, so tapping into sacral chakra energetics, sex, money, power, people are like, oh, that sounds amazing. But you've got to work through your triggers, process your emotions to be able to create the space to let the energetics of different chakras actually land and do their thing. Okay, so yeah, heavy relationship stuff. And do you feel like there's some sort of repeating pattern, some sort of person that you continue to attract? With relationships and with anything in our life, I was thinking about this on the drive home after I was dropping Violet off at school, is I am amazed that when I ask people, what do you desire? How many people have got no idea what it is they want in their life? And this really gets revealed for me in the release process in the sneaky ways people will bypass it. And I can tell that when they can't do something in a release process, it's also playing out in their physical life. All right. So just going back to my notes, you've been using the release techniques. Now, there are some variations to the release techniques. So the one that you'll sometimes hear me talk about on past podcast episodes or interviews is when we release on a person, because that's usually the easiest thing to do. We've got evidence of having an argument or an interaction that was unpleasant with a person. So releasing with a physical person that actually has ears and can speak and communicate with us in most cases is the easiest form of release. It creates the basic foundation. That's where I usually start people. But there are many variations of this foundation of how to do the release process with organs that are not functioning in your body. So for example, your kidneys are not functioning the way you desire. They have a message, and you would be able to use the release process to find out this message. Okay. There's a slight variation in how you do the two-way part, because it's a one-way conversation, two-way conversation, inner child, younger self. In this case, when you're releasing on an organ, the two-way is a slight variation. The one-way is the same, the two-way is a slight variation, and then there is no inner child or younger self conversation that you really need to have with this one. So, yeah, releasing on organs that are no longer in your body because you might have had them removed, dysfunctional disease state organs, just things not functioning in your body. You could do a release process on a virus that has hit you and wearing you down. You can do release processes on the government, the community, inanimate things. I've had a lot of people recently sell businesses and trying to sell their house and selling and buying houses. Even for myself, I did a release process on the rental property we were previously in, this property that we now live in, the commercial property that we sold. There are so many layers to the release process, and I never knew that when I created it, it could go into all of these layers. So really on the Moth portal, you've got a glimpse of it, and we often will have a lot of releases to do on people, but just know it goes beyond. I always say to people, my work goes beyond, there's more layers, but you've got to create a foundation and you've got to decide to lead yourself into this work. And I feel like the next layer for you would be to come into the release course where I can have my eyes on the releases that you've been doing. Because, you know, I just think that anything we have a desire for. So I look at when I skied, when I got into horses, when I wanted to start a business, is I called on support and people who had gone there before. And I was really committed to the journey. Support is just something that is just so huge for me. And I used to be someone who would just work things out on my own. But when you can be vulnerable enough to show up and say, this is the work I've done, and I'm going to be open to critical feedback. And when you can hold that critical feedback, you can then improve and things become perfect in the motion of. Don't expect yourself to be perfect with it straight away. I don't expect anyone to be perfect with the release process. Like even my one-to-one clients, when I'm working with them, they're like, oh, I'm just so in my head and I can't believe I'm not getting this. I'm like, repeat it. That's what we're here to do. You're going to practice it. You're going to do your homework. You're going to share it with me, and you're going to get better and better at it. And then it gets to the point where I've got no feedback because it's like, this release just nailed it. It's got all the elements in it. How are you feeling? And they're starting to notice the changes in their life. So anything that we desire in life, we've got to commit to it. We've got to put the work in, and we can get there faster when we have support as well. But there's so many people that are curious about this release process that I wanted to give you some insight into it. All of my work comes back to process your emotions, empty out your emotional cup. Then you can tap into soul purpose, manifesting. But you've got to create the space before you can have the more. You just can't keep on adding more and more stuff. So Expand Your Capacity is a really great masterclass that is on the Moth portal that just talks about how we just can't layer more mindset stuff on top of an already full cup. So whenever I feel stuck, I ask for support. I ask my coaches, what can you see that I can't see? Okay. Especially when, yeah, you're giving something a go and it's like, why is it working for some people and it's not working for me? It's like, well, maybe your body, your nervous system, your mind, your voice is just doing these sneaky bypasses. There's a lot of power in the language that we use as well. So I'm actually correcting a lot of people's grammar in their release processes. But when they see it and when they maybe redo those releases, they feel the difference in their body. Okay. So there's a certain amount of stuff that we can do on our own, and then there's a time where when we do it with others, because there's usually an amazing group that comes together with release. And when we have support from someone who's not emotionally attached to our own emotional past, then that's when we start to move through. Okay, there's also a time and a place. Like releases can get quite negative, and sometimes I have to tell my clients, all right, let's just stop for a little bit. There's also positive releases. That's a variation that you can start to learn as well. But yeah, it's all just very nuanced based on what the person might be experiencing. Sometimes there is that time for releases. Sometimes there's time for more passive work. Sometimes you've got to lean back. It's not about go, go, go all the time, which is real masculine energy. And for me, I share with my clients that maybe once a fortnight, maybe once every couple of months, I do a release. I do have this habit in myself that I often wait for about 6 things to build up, where I'm like, oh my God, what is going on? Like all these different things keep on hitting, all these challenges. It's like, Jen, use your own process, practice what you preach, go and release on it, find out the message. And quite often, these things are intertwined. Things happen in our external life before they hit our body internally, physically, mentally. Okay. I did do a podcast recently on how to stop anxiety, and I did talk a bit about depression because anxiety, depression is normal. But it's not normal when you stay in heightened states of anxiety or the really low sustained states of depression where you cannot function in life. And before you got there, you would have had the earlier signs, but then it really hit crisis. So I don't want you to think that I don't want anxiety, I don't want depression. I experience glimpses of it, but it's very momentary. It's for a very short period of time. And sometimes, like when I get into the more low states, it's like, okay, just sit back, sit with this, experience it. I don't want to bypass it. What is the message in this? Okay. All right, I think I'm almost there. So you want to move forward in life, and I would really hold on to that as a desire. Now, you may not know exactly how you want to move forward in life, but I think along with receiving this message, I asked, what have you been through on the Moth portal? So whenever you join the Moth portal, I will see your name pop up and I will email you and ask you, give me a brief overview, or you can jump in when you've signed up and give me a brief overview, just like a little paragraph of where you're at, where you want to be, what's going on for you. And I will tell you the order of what I think you could start with, and then because there's so much on there that it's not relevant for everyone and everything, but there is a lot on there and there's something to meet you with where you're at. And the membership is designed for a season for a reason. And then if you're feeling like, oh, I'm after more, the next step would be release. So yeah, I've had quite a few inquiries recently, people wanting to work one-to-one, or they've been really curious about the release course. And I say, shoot myself in the foot, because I say, look, it can be intense, but I've run that 7 times now. I've just wrapped up the last release course. I feel like every round gets better and better. I have some clients that have come on every single release course, not because they're not getting it, because there's just something more available for them each time. And this work is work of a lifetime. There are many, many layers for you to go beyond. But if I went into like the full-on energetics, you probably wouldn't get me. Some of you would get me. I started talking a lot about the energetic side of things, like the upside. I mean, energetics is neither good or bad, right? But energetics is fascinating. It's a lot in the desire space. I'm really tapping into how can I become more energetically aligned to the things that I desire to create in my life. But there's a different stage and a phase. I did this post on my Instagram, the 3 stages and phases you'll find yourself in coaching. And there's probably more beyond that, but that's what I've experienced. And I started talking about energetics. I started talking about desires, and someone who had worked with me almost from the very beginning said, I love what you share, but I actually just don't get it. I'm like, okay. So, some people say to me, I've tried all these different therapies, but they don't really work for me. I don't believe that they don't work for you. It's just that maybe it wasn't the right match for you for where you were at. And also, at what level did you go in? Did you work with someone one-to-one? Did you work with someone in a group, or did you self-pace yourself? Because our mind, our human mind, brain does funny things to bypass the hard stuff and move past the resistance, to move us into the life that we really desire. So coming back to the stuckness, is it out of alignment? Is it resistance? A lot of the time it is resistance for people. That's where support's really valuable. That is where friendships are going to drop off, and you're going to start to attract new people into your life that have gone before you, that have created evidence of what's possible. And then you've just got to believe it in yourself. Beyond belief, you've got to know that you can create a different life for yourself. And it is going to be a little bit uncomfortable at times. But that's all I will say. It will be a little bit uncomfortable, but it is so worth it. I see a lot of people live in a low grade of discomfort because they know they can function, but I want you to know that you can function and not have this low grade discomfort ongoing. So, sorry, I went off on a tangent, but yeah, people have been inquiring a lot about the release course, about one-to-one work, and I shoot myself in the foot saying, it can be intense, but I just know some people sit as a fly on the wall and they do get something out of the group. I just don't want you to come into, or anyone's course, thinking I'm going to be fixed in 6 weeks. Yes, there are amazing and miraculous things that happen for people in a short period of time. And there are always layers beyond for you to access. And so I'm really happy that I've got the Moth portal, and I can say to people, look, self-paced, you're not going to push it. You're just going to do whatever you're able to do, and see the Moth portal as a space for you to receive. There are some practical exercises that you can do. These are the exercises that my one-to-one clients get. But the Moth portal is a really nice ease in if that's what you feel like you need and that's what your nervous system needs before the next release course, which will be kicking off in August. So I'm really going to be sharing a lot more about that. And for those of you, if you're in the Moth portal and you're feeling a little bit lost, just email me, tell me what you've worked through, and I'll tell you the next things that you can work on. But also be aware, if you're starting things and you're not completing it and you're still trying to work it out on your own, then that is the time to, take that next layer, trust yourself, invest in yourself, and go on that journey. I always trust that everything is for a reason and season. Some people will stay with me for a long time. Some people will stay with me for a short period of time. But as they go on this path, the next person always shows up. So when you're ready to surrender to that journey, it is a beautiful experience. I hope that answered your question. If anyone else would like to voice message me a question, I like the voice message so I can hear your energy behind it. Find me on my personal Facebook page. Send me a voice message. I do check my message requests every now and then. And I love it if you can introduce yourself, keep your message to 1 to 2 minutes, and I play it back just like I have these last few episodes, and I just answer in the moment. Okay, thank you. And I will drop the links for the Moth Portal and the release course waitlist that's happening in August in the show notes.